Hello wrestling fans. Welcome back to the $20 million Pro Wrestle Machine studio and welcome back to the show. Through the use of the Pro Wrestle Machine, September 8, 1997 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. What happened behind the scenes of the NWO's 4 Horsemen parody? Randy Couture gets his first UFC No. 1 Contenders match. Kensuke Sasaki wins IWGP title. Dale Lewis bio, and more. By Observer staff. Dan Severn officially came to terms with Semaphore Entertainment Group this past week to be Mark Coleman's replacement in the UFC Heavyweight Championship match against Maurice Smith on the October 17th pay-per-view show. Severn, 39, will not only be the oldest competitor ever in a UFC championship match but also get a chance to become the company's first two-time champion to go along with being the only Triple Crown winner, tournament winner, ultimate winner, and heavyweight champion in the UFC's nearly 4-year history. But more importantly, this match could likely be the final springboard into the long-anticipated leap from being a part-time pro wrestler and part-time shooter to going full-time into pro wrestling, provided he captures the championship, and could then become the first champion to retire with the belt in UFC history as well. It is considered a strong possibility by those close to Severn that should he beat the 36-year-old Smith, that he'll parlay going out as champion into going more active in pro wrestling and use the title win as his farewell to shooting. He already has fairly regular commitments in Japan with IWA, which would lessen the possibility that New Japan would use him at this point, even though New Japan is trying to exploit the shooter gimmick heavily at this point, and a UFC champion who retired as champion, never losing it in battle coming to New Japan would certainly work well within their product and potential plans. Severn has had dealings of late with Antonio Inoki, but New Japan hasn't booked him in more than 1 year after a disappointing performance in a match with Yoshiaki Fujiwara after a big build-up in August of 1996, which caused him to accept the recent IWA offer. Severn has also been in negotiations with the WWF for months and even appeared as a commentator and did what could later become the beginning of an angle with Ken Shamrock on Raw a few months back. Both sides see the likelihood of a deal being stronger now than it has been in some time. An angle with Shamrock is a natural on one hand, because of their 2 well-known pay-per-view shoot matches with each winning one, but others are leery of it because it might be difficult for the two to have a good pro wrestling match. The angle could even be made stronger if Severn can beat Smith, since Smith has a long-time affiliation with the Shamrock family. The major holdup at this point appears to be the restrictive nature of the WWF's contract offer. The WWF has been interested for some time in promoting a Severn vs. Shamrock feud, with a traditional pro wrestling match likely attempted to be sold as a shoot, if everything is signed, likely for the 1998 WrestleMania in Boston. Severn has been wanting back in UFC since losing his championship to Coleman in a match where he was caught in a side choke surprisingly quickly and didn't look impressive at all. Vitor Belfort, who with a 4-0 NHB record and 1 UFC heavyweight tournament win, is considered by many as the future of UFC. He'll oppose 1997 U.S. Greco-Roman national champion in the 220-pound weight division, Randy Couture, who is 2-0 with 1 UFC heavyweight tournament win. The winner of this match is slated to challenge whomever holds the heavyweight title on the ensuing UFC pay-per-view, which is currently scheduled for December but could be moved back to January depending upon how or if the pay-per-view climate looks to change. The show will also likely feature a heavyweight tournament, which will probably include Tank Abbott, and 1 or 2 alternate heavyweight matches to be broadcast to end up being either a 6 or 7 match pay-per-view show. There is no site for the October 17th show. The show was originally slated to be from Kazakhstan, a former republic of the old Soviet Union, which would be the first UFC show outside the United States. However, the first 2 checks sent from the local promoters bounced, so that site is in grave jeopardy. The general feeling is the show will emanate from somewhere in the Southeast, either in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, or Louisiana. Louisiana, which has a boxing commission that looks very favorable on and will sanction UFC, would be the first choice, but Semaphore Entertainment Group hasn't been able to find an available building on that night, so Georgia looks more likely. Severn, with a 15-3-1 record, has fought more sanctioned NHB matches since the debut of UFC in 1993 than any other competitor. He is the biggest name that fights regularly on smaller shows around the world. Most recently, he came off wins in a non-NHB shooting match on August 16 in Amarillo, Texas against Paul Buntello, followed by a very hard-fought victory on August 23 in Guam in an NHB match against Lance Gibson. Besides some traditional pro wrestling matches, he has NHB commitments on September 5 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana against John Dixon and October 12 in Tokyo against Yasunori Matsumoto, although he is likely to attempt to cancel the latter date which was booked before he got the Smith match since it would come just 5 days before his title match. Reports on his fights have ranged from him looking to be in great shape in Amarillo, to what many categorized as a subpar performance several weeks earlier in Iowa fighting to a time limit draw against an inexperienced no-name competitor in a match many felt had there been judges that he would have lost via decision. His only NHB losses have all been via submission from chokes in matches with Royce Gracie, Ken Shamrock, and Coleman. Similar to the two Shamrock vs. Severn matches, this will be a legitimate match among foreign stars from two very distinctly different pro wrestling offices in Japan, Severn with IWA and Smith with rings. On paper it's a hard match to call. Severn would probably go in as the favorite to win the match, likely via decision, in the eyes of most of the experts who follow the sport. Unlike Coleman, Severn, who is billing himself as the greatest steroid-free athlete in the NHB sport, isn't likely to either go out too fast or run out of gas. His most recent encounter, with Gibson, a 5'10", 211-pounder out of the Matt Hume stable in Seattle who was described as a real badass, on August 23 in Guam was apparently a sensational fight with Severn taking a lot of punishment on his feet before finally getting the match to the ground and winning with a top wristlock submission in 26:40. Therein lies the interesting nature of this match. Smith, 36, proved in his match with Coleman that he was much stronger defensively on the ground than most had given him credit for. On his feet, Severn will not do well against the experienced kickboxer. However, Coleman took Smith down quickly and it was only after Coleman totally ran out of gas that Smith was able to mount any offense. Severn, who is noted for having amazing stamina, particularly for his size and age, isn't likely to run out of gas. But based on Smith's 3-0 record, with 2 of his wins coming against people he wasn't expected to beat, he and trainer Frank Shamrock can't be underestimated when it comes to preparing and executing a game plan to beat his scheduled opponent, particularly one like Severn whose strengths and weaknesses are well known within that world after so many matches. On paper it looks to be a strategic lengthy contest and a war of attrition, as opposed to a crowd-pleasing match with a lot of fireworks, but one never knows what will happen. In the wake of an unsuccessful meeting between Eric Bischoff, Conan and Paco Alonso, which was an attempt to put together Lucha Libre-style pay-per-view shows in 1998, the war between Promo Azteca and EMLL heated up again over the weekend with CMLL heavyweight champion Steel, Sean Couples aka Sean Morley, the Headhunters and Kevin Quinn no showing the August 29th show at Arena Mexico and instead doing a run-in on the Promo Azteca show in nearby Naucalpan. The report from the meeting held on August 28 in Marina del Rey, California are that Conan and Alonso were cordial at the beginning, but there ended up being a disagreement and things got worse and they were yelling and swearing by the time the meeting ended on the sour note. The run-ins were the public confirmation that Victor Quiñones, the FMW booker and WWF foreign talent liaison, and Conan had put together a deal in which Quiñones would send his talent to Azteca instead of working with Alonso and EMLL, and in exchange Azteca talent not booked with WCW would be made available for Quiñones to send to the WWF. With Conan and Quiñones working together, it solidifies both of their power base since they are supplying the cheaper working foreign talent for both WWF and WCW. In addition, all the lucha-style wrestlers that the WWF were to sign to contracts would likely wind up working for Azteca instead of EMLL, which would mean that Hysteria will be jumping to Azteca from AAA. We don't have much in the way of details on the August 29th Arena Mexico show which La Fiera beat Bestia Salvaje in a hair versus hair match before about 3,500 fans. The vacant CMLL tag titles were to be decided in a match with Headhunters versus Dr. Wagner Jr. and Emilio Charles Jr. But when the Hunters no-showed, Wagner and Charles wound up beating Atlantis and Brazo de Plata for the vacant titles. Across town in Naucalpan, the Promo Azteca television taping was headlined by Conan and Tinieblas Jr. and Lizmark Jr. and Tarzan Boy vs. Pierroth Jr., Black Magic and Jerry Estrada and Black Warrior. It wound up with first Silver King, Dandy and El Texano hitting the ring to help Pierroth. Los Villanos then attacked them, followed by Ninja de Fuego, Kato Kung Lee and Salcero hitting the ring and doing a triple tope. Steel and Quinn showed up attacking Los Villanos, and then the Headhunters shockingly ran in and squashed everyone. Shinya Hashimoto's run as the longest reigning heavyweight champion in a major league promotion came to an end on the same day that Akira Maeda stepped foot in a New Japan ring for the first time in more than 10 years. Kensuke Sasaki captured the IWGP title from Hashimoto before an overflow crowd of 18,000 fans on August 31 at the Yokohama Arena. Maeda, who started his career in New Japan before being fired from the promotion in 1987 for his infamous shoot kick on Riki Choshu that in some ways contributed to making him one of the more enduring lasting legends in Japanese pro wrestling history, showed up unannounced in the ring to congratulate Choshu in his retirement ceremony and got a huge reaction from the crowd. Obviously that was another lifetime ago in the careers of both wrestlers, as Maeda, in a shoot, kicked Choshu hard in the eye, breaking his orbital bone, during a six-man tag match while Choshu was basically defenseless as he was holding a wrestler in a scorpion deathlock. Maeda was fired from New Japan, not exactly from that incident which caused both wrestlers to have to miss the important tag team tournament that year, but for refusal to accept the punishment, a fine, a tour of Mexico and having to return and put Choshu over clean, handed down by New Japan. Instead, Maeda got the financial backing to start his own promotion, the UWF, which became the hottest wrestling promotion in the world for a short time and in many ways was revolutionary in paving the way for groups such as K1, UFC, Rings and Pancrase, which all catered and garnered interest in Japan from a fan base originally created by Maeda's UWF, which split into several promotions a few years later. On July 6, Maeda, who himself will be retiring next year, surprisingly showed up at a major war show, his first time at a traditional pro wrestling event since 1987, to congratulate Genichiro Tenryu, who was celebrating his 20th year as an active pro wrestler. Sasaki, who in August won both the IWGP title, the IWGP Tag Team title, with Kazuo Yamazaki on August 10 at the Nagoya Dome, in the G1 Climax Tournament, beating Hiroyoshi Tenzan in the finals on August 3 at Tokyo Sumo Hall, is being given the biggest push in a long time within the New Japan organization. He was also put over in a tournament in September of 1996 involving the top names from both New Japan and WCW. Sasaki captured the IWGP title for the first time in his career on a show honoring his mentor, who will be retiring on January 4 at the Tokyo Dome. After winning the title, Sasaki immediately challenged Choshu for what will almost surely be the Tokyo Dome main event and be a sure sellout. Sasaki, who is generally considered the worst worker and least over of the big four who are programmed by Choshu to dominate the New Japan single scene, Hashimoto, Sasaki, Great Muta, and Masahiro Chono, has never beaten Choshu in a singles match. Originally he was supposed to get his first career win over Choshu in the 1996 G1 tournament, but an injury to Junji Hirata screwed up the plans and made it necessary for Choshu to beat Sasaki to get the necessary points to reach the finals, since the end result of that tournament was for Choshu to go over. Hashimoto had held the IWGP title, New Japan's belt, which was created in 1983 as being a championship considered one step in stature above a world heavyweight title, since April 29, 1996, when he defeated Nobuhiko Takada at the Tokyo Dome before 65,000 fans and $5.9 million, the second largest crowd in Japanese wrestling history and second largest gate in all of pro wrestling history. While the title change, described as a good match, ending in 1654 when Sasaki got the pin with his wife's patented finisher, the Northern Lights Bomb, was the main event, there is little doubt it was Choshu who drew the house. The match took place just 1 week after a well-reported tragedy in the Hashimoto family where his mother-in-law died being hit by a car in protecting the life of his 2-year-old daughter. The crowd went crazy for Choshu, as it has in all his matches since he announced his farewell series. All Choshu merchandise sold out in record time at the show, which likely drew the biggest non-dome or outdoor stadium show gate ever in Japanese wrestling history. Choshu was put in an Old Generation Superstars vs. NWO 6-man tag, teaming with Tenryu and longtime rival Tatsumi Fujinami against Muta and Tenzan and Hiro Saito, taking the place of an injured Chono. Muta's face was painted with black lettering that said "Bye-bye Choshu." After Choshu pinned Saito after his lariat in 8:56, they had a retirement ceremony in the ring. Among those honoring Choshu were Tenryu, Fujinami, Maeda, longtime tag team partner Animal Hamaguchi and his daughter, current world champion in women's freestyle wrestling Kyoko Hamaguchi, along with Antonio Inoki. During the ceremony, Choshu said emphatically that unlike virtually every wrestler who announces his retirement and then comes back, he will never wrestle again after January 4th, to the point that most believed him. It is generally expected that after retiring in January, that Choshu will, when it comes to duties, will take over as president, maybe not in name right away, but eventually in name as well, of the company from Seiji Sakaguchi. Dale Lewis, a former Olympic wrestler who later went on to hold regional pro wrestling titles around North America during a 19-year career, passed away on August 30th at his home in Bend, Oregon after a lengthy bout with leukemia at the age of 62. Lewis represented the U.S. as a heavyweight in Greco-Roman wrestling in the 1956 Olympics in Melbourne, Australia and 1960 Olympics in Rome, Italy, losing in the second round in both cases. In 1961, he represented the U.S. in the World Freestyle Championships in Yokohama, Japan and placed fourth as a heavyweight. He won the gold medal in the heavyweight division in freestyle at the 1959 Pan American Games, was AAU National Freestyle Heavyweight Champion in 1961 and captured the NCAA championship while wrestling for the University of Oklahoma as a heavyweight in 1960 and 1961. There were several interesting anecdotes regarding his amateur wrestling career. Lewis never wrestled in high school, where he was a football and basketball star. He got a dual sports scholarship in both sports to Marquette University. He ended up leaving Marquette for the Marines and had his first wrestling match of any kind at the age of 18, and just a few years later was one of the best heavyweights in the world. During his amateur wrestling career, he crossed paths with two legendary pro wrestlers, Cowboy Bill Watts and Gorilla Monsoon, who were both great amateurs, which friends say later affected his pro wrestling career negatively. Lewis and Watts went to the University of Oklahoma at the same time and had a legendary gym match that went about 20 minutes to something of a stalemate to determine who would be the school's heavyweight. In a match that Lewis would later tell friends was the toughest match he ever had, whether it be Olympics, Pan Am Games or whatever, the coach picked Lewis, since he was 5 years older and had all the international wrestling experience. Watts never wrestled varsity at Oklahoma while Lewis ended up winning 2 NCAA titles. Lewis always believed as a pro he was held back in the Oklahoma area, which should have been one of his best territories due to his college background, because Watts was the top star and always carried considerable power. In the 1960 Olympic trials, Lewis defeated Bob Morella, who later became known as Gorilla Monsoon, to make the team. Morella became a major power force in the Northeast to the point that Lewis, who held regional titles nearly everywhere he went in the 60s and early 70s, never wrestled in the WWF because he was told Morella would never let him in. Lewis got his start in pro wrestling in 1961 under the training of Vern Gagne, and because he was considered the top heavyweight in the country at the time, Gagne immediately gave he and Pat Kennedy the AWA Tag Team titles, beating Bob Geigel and Hard Boiled Haggerty on November 16, 1961 in Rochester, Minnesota. But it was only a 7-day title run before losing to Geigel and Otto von Krupp. Boris Malenko, although considered a good worker, he wasn't tremendously charismatic and gained his best success in territories where the promoters liked to feature real wrestlers as top stars because of their own amateur backgrounds, such as the AWA, Gagne, Florida, Eddie Gossett, Amarillo, Dory Funk, and Calgary, Sue Hart. He held the Southern title in Florida in 1970, beating Bob Orton Sr., losing to Hiro Matsuda in 1972, winning and losing to Masked Zodiac, who was Bob Orton Sr., the Florida title in 1969, beating Cyclone Negro, losing to Masa Saito, the Florida Brass Knucks title in 1969, beating Beautiful Brutus, later better known as Bugsy McGraw, and losing to Don Curtis, and Florida Tag Team title with Missouri Mauler in 1970, beating Bronco Lubick and Chris Markoff, losing to Jose Lothario and Argentina Apollo. He held, among numerous other titles, the Los Angeles TV title as Professor Dale Lewis with glasses and a graduation cap, Pacific Northwest Heavyweight, and Stampede Wrestling International Tag Team title. He retired in the late 70s and lived mainly in Portland, Oregon, coming out of retirement for his final run in 1980 in Stampede Wrestling with brother Gene Lewis, Gene Pettit, better known now as indie wrestler Cousin Luke, as a tag team. For the past several years he had been working as a sales rep at an RV dealership and a few years back moved from Portland to Bend, Oregon. He was very competitive in everything he did, remembered Pettit, a good friend of his for nearly 3 decades, who Lewis broke into wrestling in 1973 as his younger brother Gene in Oklahoma. He didn't like losing in anything. He was a very outgoing person. Japanese television rundown. July 26, New Japan. 1. Kazuo Yamazaki beat Akitoshi Saito with an armbreaker in 55. 2. Tatsuhiro Takaiwa pinned Shinjiro Otani in 1611. The last 7 minutes aired on television and it was an excellent match. Takaiwa may be the most improved wrestler in the world over the past year, and Otani as a worker is one of the best right now. They combined both hard hitting and submissions with rope breaks along with big moves. Takaiwa did his triple bomb, 3 power bombs in the same move, and got the pin with his Death Valley bomb off the middle ropes, which is one of the real hot moves in Japan right now. 4 stars. 3. Masahiro Chono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan and NWO Sting and Great Muta and Michael Wallstreet, Satoshi Kojima and Manabu Nakanishi and Shinya Hashimoto, Kensuke Sasaki and Tadao Yasuda in 1345. The last 5 minutes aired and it was also a great match. Sting and Muta both used the baseball bat several times. Muta destroyed both Nakanishi and Kojima with the bat and hit Sasaki as well. Finish saw Muta blow the green mist in Hashimoto's eyes and pin him after a facebuster. After the match, Muta spray-painted NWO on Hashimoto's back until Tatsumi Fujinami and Takashi Iizuka made the save. 3.5 stars. 4. Antonio Inoki and Tiger King beat Sasaki and Kazuyuki Fujita in 9:34. Sasaki didn't sell well for Tiger, although Tiger was the best of the four in this match. Tiger used a lot of cool kicks. Fujita, a protege of Inoki, and Sayama, who is an amateur wrestling champion and will be pushed as an undercard shooter type, is very green but has a lot of potential. Inoki ended up pinning Fujita with the Enzudri. 2.25 stars. 5. Naoya Ogawa beat Yamazaki in 8:30. Yamazaki has a shooter rep since he's originally from the old UWF and UWFI. This was a martial arts style match and a good bout for those parameters. Early on, Ogawa blocked Yamazaki's kicks and power slammed him and worked for submissions. Yamazaki made a comeback with a flurry of kicks to knock Ogawa down. He even used a German suplex on him and got a choke with a body scissors on Ogawa, who had to get to the ropes. Finish saw Ogawa use his STO, which is a fast judo takedown, and win with a new finishing move, which is a combination of a triangle choke and an Achilles tendon submission. 2.5 stars. August 2nd, New Japan. 1. El Samurai won the J Crown from Jushin Liger in 1940. The final 10 minutes aired on television. A lot of good moves, but the match lacked in heat. Samurai used a tope. Liger worked the leg well, including using an Achilles tendon submission before Samurai made the ropes. Samurai missed a pescado and was power-bombed on the floor. Liger came off the top row with a headbutt onto Samurai on the floor. Samurai then kicked out of everything Liger threw at him, including a super fisherman buster. Liger was working the finish on a bad knee, but it played no part in the storyline, but he was having trouble getting up from the ground. Samurai used a swinging DDT and a reverse DDT off the top rope, followed by another reverse DDT for near falls. He screwed up a reverse DDT near the finish before using a Samurai Bomb, Thunderfire Power Bomb, and another reverse DDT to win the title. Match would have been better than 4 stars almost anywhere, but this was like a dome crowd and reactions, and this kind of match doesn't play as well in that type of conditions. 3.75 stars. 2. Tenzan and Wall Street and NWO Sting and Hiro Saito beat Nakanishi and Kojima and Yasuda and Fujinami in 13:10 when Sting pinned Yasuda after a shoulder block off the top rope. Second half aired on television and it was good. It's scary that NWO Sting is turning into a better worker than the original. 2.75 stars. 3. Riki Choshu and Hashimoto beat Muta and Chono in 12:39. This was a big show main event and had great heat. Muta used gimmicks including choking with a rope and a baseball bat. After that was done, they had an intense match with strong fiery comebacks by Choshu and Hashimoto. Finish saw Muta came off the top rope with a bat but ended up hitting Chono after Choshu moved. Choshu scored the pin on Chono after 2 lariats. 3.25 stars. August 3rd, All Japan. 1. Williams and Albright won the double tag team titles from Kobashi and Ace in 29:36. About 22 minutes aired on television. This was horrible. Easily the worst major All Japan Budokan match in years and maybe of the entire decade of the 90s. I wouldn't have believed just how bad it was had I not seen it myself. Considering the talent and the setting, it was a worst match of the year candidate. Nearly everything about the match was bad except they did get good heat coming down the stretch for the near falls. By that point, Albright was blown up and really looking bad. He didn't look good early but did get a reaction for his powerful suplexes. Williams and Ace just looked bad, as in everything they did was off. Kobashi didn't look bad, but everyone else was so bad he couldn't come close to carrying it. Finish saw Williams pin Kobashi after a double-team power bomb off the middle rope. Dud. August 9th, New Japan. This show was taped from Bash at the Beach in Daytona Beach and featured interviews with Hogan and Bischoff. It aired clips of Muta and Chono versus Steiners and Hogan and Rodman versus Luger and Giant, along with the Nitro match where Muta and Chono beat Public Enemy. It's funny, but watching Rodman within the context of a Japanese television show, he was totally horrible. Watching it on American television, and he was surprisingly good. August 10th, All Japan Women. 1. Yukishina pinned Shaparita Asari 18:13 with a reversal of a cradle after lots of near falls. About half the match aired on television and it was good. 2.75 stars. 2. Tomoko Watanabe pinned Kumiko Maekawa in a battle of tag team partners in 13:48. Again, about half the match aired, ending with Watanabe getting the pin with her screwdriver gut wrench turned into a Dr. Bomb. 2.5 stars. 3. Manami Toyota pinned Kaoru Ito in 1821. This was one of Toyota's real classic performances. She did just about everything and didn't miss anything. She did the rolling cradle around the ring over and over and then a running springboard plancha. She put Ito on a table outside the ring and came off the top rope on her, but Ito got her foot up and hit Toyota in the face. Ito did her double foot stomp over and over, including one off the top rope to the floor. Toyota did a missile kick off the top rope outside the ring and another to Ito's back in the ring. She used both the Japanese Ocean Suplex and Japanese Ocean Cyclone Suplex for near falls. She did a moonsault, but Ito got her feet up on the second moonsault and did all kinds of double foot stomps. Finally, Toyota went for a Japanese Ocean Cyclone Suplex from the top rope, but on the way down, Ito grabbed an armbar which would have made a great finish, but Toyota made the ropes. Ito did a Super Fisherman Buster for a near fall, and Toyota came back with a German suplex. Finally, Toyota got the pin with a cross-arm German suplex. Maybe the best women's match of the year. 4.5 stars. 4. Asia Kong and Kyoko Inoue beat Etsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda. A very different match from the previous one, but a great one as well. This was a combination ECW/FMW style brawl, except that the wrestling between the brawling was top-notch as well. They were in the stands using gimmicks. Kong juiced early from a chair shot. Shimoda did a springboard flip tope and Mita followed with a tope of her own. Kong attacked Mita with a soda cannon. They brawled all over the building, ending up in the rafters with both teasing like they were going to throw the other off the balcony, which is about 18 feet up. Mita choked Kong with a rope. Finally, Kong got the fire extinguisher and sprayed it everywhere. Kong pile drove Shimoda through a table in the ring. Shimoda blew the kabuki green mist in Inoue's eyes. After tons of near falls and about 33 minutes of this, Kong finally hit the Hurricane on Shimoda for the win. Easily the best AJW television show of the year. 4.5 stars. August 17th, New Japan. 1. Fujinami beat Choshu in 6:48 with a Dragon Sleeper in Choshu's final match in Nagoya. Choshu got a monstrous pop when he came out. Mainly mat work. Well executed, but considering how short they were going and what a big show it was, they really didn't do much. Choshu did bring his Saito suplex and flying head scissors out of retirement in this match. Aside from that, it was just lariats and the Scorpion Deathlock. After 5 minutes, you had the impression it was a good build for a 15 to 20 minute match. But then they went right to the finish. Fujinami was going to do the abdominal stretch, dropped into a cradle, but they screwed up his spot and Fujinami went right to the Dragon Sleeper for the submission. Considering everything, Choshu went down too easily. After the match, Choshu hugged both Fujinami and ref Pete Takahashi. 1.5 star. 2. Muta beat Ogawa in 6:34. This was the match where Ogawa was exposed and it was his first bad performance. Muta blew the mist in ref Antonio Inoki's eyes before the bell. Ogawa then attacked Muta, but he looked tentative and didn't show any fire in getting revenge for his mentor. The fans were totally for Muta in a big way. When Muta took Ogawa's black belt off his gi and started choking him with it, it got a big baby face pop. Muta got the sleeper on Ogawa, but Ogawa made the ropes. Finish saw Ogawa make a comeback and put on his finishing triangle and Achilles combination submission, but Muta blew the green mist in his eyes. Muta then used a low blow and put Ogawa in an armbreaker. Muta couldn't get the submission, so he began spreading Ogawa's fingers. At that point, Tiger King threw in the towel. Muta put an NWO t-shirt over Ogawa as he laid helpless on the mat. 1/2 star. 3. Hashimoto pinned Tenzan in 1709 to retain the IWGP heavyweight title. This was a very simple match. The two simply beat the hell out of each other. Even on television, it was unbelievably stiff as far as the chops and kicks back and forth. There was little in the way of wrestling. It was reminiscent of a mid to late 80s Ric Flair versus Ron Garvin style of match. Finally, Hashimoto hit a brainbuster and got the pin. There was no real build to the finish. But the two definitely took the punishment to make it something of a memorable but not classic big show main event. This was probably a lot better live than on television because of its stiffness. 3.5 stars. Puerto Rico. The major event from last week was August 23rd in Caguas before 1,200 fans with Golden Boy, Chiqui Star, beating Carlos Colon in a mask versus hair match. It wound up with most of the undercard wrestlers battling around the ring, and Invader number 2, Roberto Soto, threw powder in Invader number 1's eyes and then got into the ring and gave Colon a low blow, allowing Golden Boy to get the pin, so Colon lost his hair. The main event saw Ray Gonzalez retain the Universal title, beating Vampire Warrior. Huracan Castillo, Jesus in WWF Boricua's team, returned on August 29th and Bayamon to headline, challenging Gonzalez for the title. Invader number 3 returned August 30th to help Invader number 1 in his feud with Invader number 2 in Los Pastores. None of the wrestlers had been paid in 5 weeks as of the weekend before Lost. Several of the wrestlers that came in for the anniversary weekend appear to be gone, including Ram Man Tom Brandi and the Youngblood brothers, the latter of whom hold the tag team titles. The wrestlers were scheduled to be paid at TV on August 27th. Mexico. Carlos Maines was released more than 1 week ago from his kidnapping. The newspapers were very quiet about how it all transpired, so we don't know if ransom was paid or not. Octagon was in an auto accident this past week and is out of action. Expect Steel to feud with La Parka in AZTECA. September 5th at Arena Mexico has Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and Atlantis and La Fiera vs. Cien Caras and Mascara Año 2000 and Universo 2000 on top, plus Negro Casas and Brazo de Plata and Shocker vs. Apollo Dantes and Bestia Salvaje and Emilio Charles Jr., Brazo de Oro and Taka Michinoku and Mascara Magica vs. Scorpio Jr. and Rey Bucanero and Violencia as the top matches. September 5th for Promo Azteca's TV taping has Tinieblas Jr. and Mascara Sagrada and Tarzan Boy and Lizmark Jr. vs. Pierroth Jr. and Black Magic and Black Warrior and Jerry Estrada, Super Astro and Mr. Aguila and Super Colo and Pantera vs. El Texano and Pirata Morgan and Pantera del Ring and Black Dragon as the top 2 matches. All Japan. Generally a quiet week building to the September 6th Budokan show with the Mitsuharu Misawa vs. Jun Akiyama match. They announced a fan appreciation show on September 15th at Korakuen Hall with a dream main event of Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada and Hiroshi Hase vs. Kena Kobashi and Akira Tao and Jun Akiyama. August 10th TV show did a 1.5 rating, while August 17th did a 3.5. New Japan. Besides the Choshu match and the IWGP heavyweight title change, the top matches at Yokohama Arena saw Naoya Ogawa beat Scott Norton with a triangle choke and Achilles tendon submission combination in 6:25 when the referee stopped the match. After the match, Inoki, working Ogawa's corner, got into it with Masahiro Chono, who was in Norton's corner and will be returning from his ankle injury on the next tour. Shinjiro Otani retained the J Crown in what was reported to us as the best match on the show, beating Koji Kanemoto in 2020 with a dragon suplex. The two slapped each other after the match and Kanemoto asked for a rematch and Otani agreed. Jushin Liger re-established himself as the number 1 contender for the J Crown, pinning Tatsuhito Takaiwa in 17 minutes with a palm thrust. The other top match saw Tiger King and Kunyaki Kobayashi beat Kendo Kashin and Kazuo Yamazaki in 8:52 when King pinned Kashin with a Tiger suplex in a so-so match. The next tour will be September 12th to September 23rd with Chris Benoit as Wild Pegasus, Jeff Farmer as NWO Sting, Dr. Wagner Jr., Marcus Bagwell, Chris Jericho and a mystery NWO wrestler who will tag with Chono in the tag team tournament. Opening night is September 12th in Sendai with Takaiwa and Otani vs. El Samurai and Kashin, Liger and Pegasus vs. Wagner and Kanemoto, Tatsumi Fujinami and Akira Nagami vs. NWO Sting and Chono, Junji Hirata and Yamazaki and Kensuke Sasaki vs. Great Muta and Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Hiro Saito, Satoshi Kojima and Manabu Nakanishi vs. Akitoshi Saito and Kengo Kimura in a first round of the tag tourney mock, and another tag tourney match with Shinya Hashimoto and Tadao Yasuda vs. Michiyoshi Ohara and Tatsutoshi Goto. September 17th in Osaka has Kashin vs. Wagner, Samurai vs. Takaiwa, Liger and Pegasus vs. Otani and Kanemoto, Hirata and Yamazaki and Sasaki vs. Bagwell and Chono and mystery partner, Fujinami and Nagami vs. Muta and Tenzan, and tag tourney matches. September 20th in Nagoya, besides the finals of the tag tourney, will be 4 singles matches, Takaiwa vs. Wagner, Samurai vs. Otani, Kanemoto vs. Pegasus and Liger vs. Jericho. In the Hashimoto family tragedy over the weekend of August 24th, his wife and 2-year-old daughter were vacationing at their grandmother's house in Chiba when there was some sort of an accident involving a car. The 81-year-old grandmother ran in front of the car to block her granddaughter from getting hit head-on. She took the blow and was killed. The granddaughter was also hit, but the angle didn't injure her seriously. Hashimoto's opponent for the September 23 show at Budokan Hall will be yet another former UFC fighter, Shane Frazier, 0-2 UFC record, who has fought and lost in the past in K1 as well, but is best known within the Japanese pro wrestling world for knocking out Kendo Nagasaki in a matter of seconds in a Vale Tudo shoot match a few years back. Besides the matches listed in last week's issue for the Budokan show, added to the card are a 6-man tag with Samurai and Liger and Pegasus versus Wagner and Jericho and Kanemoto, and a J-Crown match with Otani defending against Takaiwa. The Sasaki and Yamazaki versus Muta and Chono match looks to be non-title. August 9th TV show, which had the Dennis Rodman match from Bash at the Beach along with Muta and Chono versus Steiners, did a 2.8 rating, which is slightly below average for the promotion. The August 17th show, which aired 3 matches from the Nagoya Dome 1 week earlier, did a 7.0 rating, although since that show was in a Sunday afternoon time slot, the rating is also below what the promotion has generally done for its afternoon broadcasts of Dome shows. Other Japan notes. FMW held a press conference to announce its September 28th show at Kawasaki Baseball Stadium and announced Asia Kong vs. Shark Tsuchiya, set up by an angle on August 31st at Korakuen Hall where Tsuchiya and Crusher Maidamari attacked Kong and Kong juiced after Tsuchiya used a barbed wire bat on her, which may be an explosive match. Terry Funk vs. X, most likely Hiromichi Fuyuki, Kena Kobashi and Manukiya Mossman vs. Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki. Ken Shamrock vs. Vader. The Gladiator defends the World Brass Knucks and Independent Heavyweight title against Masato Tanaka, and the main event billed as a super real explosion time bomb death match between Atsushi Onita vs. Wing Kanemura. Onita at the press conference said that if he lost to Kanemura, that he'd retire from wrestling. That one takes a lot of nerve. The World Karate Association is promoting the annual Iki Kajiwara Martial Arts Festival on October 12th at Tokyo Sumo Hall, a combination kickboxing, pro wrestling and Vale Tudo show. Kajiwara was the creator of the Tiger Mask television cartoon that predated Satoru Sayama as the first Tiger Mask in pro wrestling. A match they are attempting and are 3/4 complete in putting together would be Sayama and the current Tiger Mask from Michinoku Pro Wrestling against Koji Kanemoto, third Tiger Mask, and Mitsuharu Misawa, second Tiger Mask. All Japan has a charity show that same day in Kumamoto, so at this point Misawa looks unlikely to appear, but New Japan has confirmed that they'll let Kanemoto work the match and wear a Tiger Mask. The gimmick is that all 4 wrestlers will wear their Tiger Mask outfit, and that Great Sasuke would be the referee. Dan Severn vs. Yasunori Matsumoto, a former karate star in Japan who now lives in Iowa and is in his 40s and got destroyed on the Mars pay-per-view show, in a Vale Tudo match was announced, although Severn may attempt to pull out of it because of its proximity to UFC. 3 other pro wrestling matches were announced: Yoshiaki Fujiwara vs. Koji Kiao with Antonio Inoki as referee, Tenryu vs. X, and an LLPW women's match with Eagle Sawai and Michiko Nagashima vs. Carol Midori and Yasha Kurenai. The annual K1 Grand Prix tournament starts September 7th with a show at the Osaka Dome, which I believe is already sold out since they are pushing Tokyo Dome tickets for November rather than Osaka tickets in their current advertising. James Waring, who went to the finals losing to Henzo Gracie in the one and only WCC pay-per-view show in NHB, and recently had an article written about him in Sports Illustrated as being the 100th best heavyweight boxer in the world, was a last-minute replacement in the tournament and will face Peter Aerts, who is one of the favorites, in Osaka. Frank Shamrock and Peter Williams of Lion's Den will debut for Pancrase in the Battle Dimension tournament on October 26th. JWP will run a benefit show for the family of Plum Mariko on October 30th at Tokyo Ota Ward Gymnasium. Mariko grew up in the Ota area of Tokyo. Hayabusa and Tanaka and Koji Nakagawa won the FMW World Street Fight 6-man titles on August 31st at Korakuen Hall from the Gladiator and Hisakatsu Oya and Mr. Ganasuke. On the same show, Geto beat Riki Fuji to win the Rocky Mountain mid-heavyweight title. FMW is loaded with injuries including Oya, blown out knee, Io, bad neck, Flying Kid Ichihara, bad knee, and women wrestlers Yoko Ikeda and Ri, bad neck. Super Delphin appeared but didn't wrestle at the Michinoku show on August 31st in Sendai, so he'll be returning to the group. He showed up without his mask and wearing sunglasses. Apparently this was an angle to build for the October 10th show, as his first match back will be on the Sumo Hall show, which is MPW's big show of the year. MPW has signed both Chris Condito and Sonny to appear on the show along with Undertaker. To continue his feud with women, Fuyuki, Geto and Jado have signed with women's promotion JD. Geto will have singles matches against Jado most of the time. Fuyuki is going to work as a referee. They are doing an angle where Fuyuki has been at their dojo learning to ref. It appears they are going to build up to a singles match with Fuyuki versus Jaguar Yokota, and if Jaguar loses, Fuyuki can run the JD company. Shudo ran a show on August 27 in Tokyo with 2 wrestlers from the USWF in Amarillo appearing. Ali Elias, a local high school wrestling coach, lost to Hayato Sakurai in 123 with an armbar. In an upset, Paul Jones beat Eric Paulson in a rematch of their EFC match, winning via decision. I believe it was Paulson's first ever loss in Shudo, however his light heavyweight title didn't change hands because the weight limit is 181 pounds and Jones weighed it at 189. The main event on the show, which has gotten a lot of attention in some circles, saw Alan Fried, the 1994 NCAA champion and a 3-time All-American from Oklahoma State, and 1,995 seconds place finisher to Tom Brands in the Freestyle Nationals take a fight with basically no notice and face the group's poster fighter, Rumina Sato, who beat him with an armbar in 59. Fried is one of the better lighter weight amateurs in the U.S., and is second place in the all-time OSU record book for most victories, behind only the legendary John Smith, and compile a .956 college career won-loss percentage over 4 years. He was basically contacted at the last minute by Mark Coleman when the fighter Coleman was going to send backed out. With no training, he went into a sport with rules similar to NHB. It made a lot of amateur fans have to respect Sato, who beat him in a match similar to the Inson Inoue-Royce Alger match at the last UFC. Kyoko Inoue held a press conference on September 2 and said that unlike Asia Kong, when she left AJW she didn't have a plan worked out. The word is that she's offering her services at a very low rate to the different indie groups. Yumi Fukawa, who also quit AJW last week, isn't garnering any interest. Added to Gia's biggest show in history on September 20 in Kawasaki, first ever meeting of Chigusa Nagio versus Asia Kong, is a WCW women's title match with Akira Hokuto versus Devil Masami of JWP, and a WCW women's cruiserweight title match with Yoshiko Tamura of AJW versus Sugar Sato. Gia promoted a tag team tournament on August 30 at Korakuen Hall with its younger women, and the tag team that won, which ended up being Sato and former WCW cruiserweight champ Toshie Uematsu, had a singles match, won by Sato, to get the title shot on September 20th. AJW has the same gym booked on September 21st with a cage match with Atsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda versus Tomoko Watanabe and Kaoru Ito, and the Gia team of Sato and Chikeo Nagashima defend the All Japan Tag Team titles against the AJW team of Shaparita Asari and Yuka Shina. Shoji Nakamaki has changed his wrestling name to Great Nakamaki, doing a Great Muta/Kabuki face painting and green mist gimmick, building to a match with Great Pogo on September 21st in Sapporo. Takashi Ishikawa's new Tokyo Pro Wrestling Corporation opens in October. Tarzan Goto announced he'd be joining the group and feud with Ishikawa on top. Also announced on the first tour were Bad News Allen and Ken Johnson from Calgary, and that Jerry Morrow would come in as a referee. Allen, who won the bronze medal in the 1976 Olympics in judo, issued a challenge to Naoya Ogawa. Negotiations to send Paul Verlins to IWA fell apart. USWA. The final live television show on WMC TV took place on August 30th after a 21-year run, actually more than 30 years since the show was on WHBQ in Memphis live on Saturday mornings for many years before going to Channel 5. The show is moving to a 1-hour, it had been 90 minutes, taped version which will air at midnight on Saturdays and be replayed on Sunday afternoons. Tony Friedman and Bill Behrens handled the announcing since Michael St. John wasn't there. Lance Russell did a telephone interview late in the show thanking fans for their cards and flowers and sounded great, and said that he hoped he could return to the show at some point. They also did a video montage showing clips of, among others, Lou Thez, Tommy Gilbert, Eddie Gilbert, Jeff Jarrett, Miss Texas, Andy Kaufman, Bill Dundee, and Jimmy Hart. They dropped balloons from the ceiling as the show went off the air. Dundee returned as referee for the Dutch Mantel vs. Tommy Dreamer main event the next day in Memphis. The August 31st Memphis card drew about 850 fans and $7,000, as ticket prices were raised. Mantel vs. Dreamer for the unified title started out with Dreamer bringing in Beulah with a referee shirt saying he wanted her to ref. She was escorted out and Dundee was made ref. After Dundee was knocked out, Dreamer used a DDT and Beulah counted the pin. Jerry Lawler hit the ring, with the storyline being that he didn't want Dreamer to win the title because it would become an ECW title, so he piledrove Beulah, attacked Dreamer and put Mantel on top and counted the pin. Dundee got up and began yelling at Lawler. It wound up with a four-way brawl with Dundee, Mantel, Lawler, and Dreamer. Dreamer wound up getting about 70% cheers. While nothing is definite, they could either come back, depending upon the ECW schedule and date conflicts, with either a 4-way match or a 6-man tag with Lawler and Mantle and Dundee versus 3 ECW wrestlers. They tried an interesting gimmick as they held a barbed wire match outside in front of the building between Brian Christopher and Billy Travis at 7 p.m. for free. It turned into a bloodbath using all the gimmicks, with Travis filled with major welts by the time it was over, ending with Travis DQ'd for Rod Price interfering. The idea is to get some people to come to the building for the free match, and since they were there, then they'd buy a ticket for the show. Since the show drew better than expected, it seemed to work. At the regular house show, PG-13 ended up beating both Rex King and Paul Diamond, after which Diamond turned on King and Stephen Dunn made the save for King to presumably start putting them back together as a team, and Dunn and Flash Flanagan to either win or retain the USWA tag titles. Dunn and Flanagan were champs at television, but PG came to the first match with the belts and were announced as champion, and nobody could figure out exactly what happened. Those in the promotion were under the impression PG won the belts from Dunn and Flanagan in the second match on that card. Lawler beat Rod Price via DQ when Dreamer attacked Lawler, and it wound up with a 3-way for a while until Price and Dreamer started ganging up on Lawler and Christopher made the save with a baseball bat. Tommy Rich returned as a heel, but at the Memphis card made the save for Doug Gilbert in his match against Doomsday. Colorado Kid also returned, which signifies that Burt Prentice is back with this promotion helping promote small towns. There is some serious discontent among members of the current ownership group since lots of money is being spent on things like a new set, but no real money is coming in. Nothing at this point has happened, but some sort of a shakeup is expected, and many of the stockholders are tense. USWA survived for years under Jerry Jarrett basically by never spending any money while everyone else went out of business. Many of the wrestlers already believe there is an ownership change, and the rumor is flying around everywhere. The situation on the August 23rd show where the police came out and tried to arrest Brian Christopher and Billy Travis was apparently something of a weird shoot. They were going to do the brawl in the street and clear it with the police, and supposedly they did, but there was a lack of communication and a car on patrol saw the incident and wanted to arrest everyone. It ended up being cleared up a few days later. Here and there. According to newspapers in Los Angeles, Hulk Hogan and actor James Caan delivered eulogies on August 27 at the funeral of Jeep Swenson. Ted DiBiase was asked but was unable to do so due to having to work the August 26 taping in Augusta, Georgia. British tabloids covered the Swenson death, attributing it to steroids, bigger than the U.S. media. His internal organs failed one by one, first his lungs, then liver, then kidneys, and then he suffered the massive heart attack that killed him. His death was the talk in the WCW locker room last week, since he had appeared on a show as recently as 1 year earlier, and it isn't like most of the wrestlers in the business haven't at least tried steroids at one time in their careers. Speaking of WCW wrestlers from 1 year ago, Luke McMasters, 54, who wrestled as the unforgettable Loch Ness, is suffering from severe cancer that is said to be life-threatening, and he's already lost 300 pounds. After raving about the Michael Modest vs. Aaron O'Grady match 2 weeks ago in Hayward, I have to mention that the Modest vs. Robert Thompson match on August 29 was even better. Both were injured but still went more than 20 minutes with good pacing and flawless execution. Modest will be out of action for a few weeks due to blowing out his ankle doing a pescado. The Learning Channel on September 7th is doing a documentary on the life of Dr. Sam Shepard, who was the guy that the TV show and movie The Fugitive was based around and who later became a pro wrestler. Wonder if they'll bring up his wrestling career. He was the guy who invented the same claw finisher that Mankind now uses. Gary Hart's World Class, the next generation promotion in the Dallas Sportatorium, has folded, and the new weekly Friday night tenant is Power Zone Wrestling out of Oklahoma City, going under the CWA name. The most recent show drew 100 at most, so it's not exactly a wrestling hotbed, using guys like Terry Garvin, Terry Sims, Action Jackson, Sam Houston, King Parsons, Bill Irwin, and Black Bart that have been around through all the different promotions over the past 10 years. NHB. K1 will neither confirm nor deny anything regarding a Hoist Gracie vs. Maurice Smith match. As the rumor mill has it, K1 and the Gracies aren't interested in the match if Smith loses to Severn. However, due to contractual clauses in Smith's contracts with both Semaphore Entertainment Group and Rings, he'd be unable to do the match unless both companies agree to it. Semaphore Entertainment Group probably wouldn't agree to it if Smith beats Severn, as they don't want their world champion fighting elsewhere and risk losing to an outsider. So from that perspective, the match looks doomed either way. Tom Erickson wound up placing fourth at the World Freestyle Wrestling Championships on August 31st in Krasnoyarsk, Russia in the 286-pound weight class. Eriksson won 3 of his 5 matches, losing in the third-place match to David Musubbles of Russia by a 4-0 margin. Eriksson, who was wrestling with a shoulder injury, had beaten Musubbles in overtime 2-0 earlier in the tournament. With a 5-0-1 record, Eriksson is generally considered one of the highest-ranking NHB heavyweights in the world. Eriksson is scheduled to debut with Pancrase now in December. Legutches, who had been in negotiations for a pay-per-view match on October 11 against Frank Shamrock before deciding against it, was the only world champion from the U.S., winning at 187.27 over Edler Asana of the Ukraine by criteria decision after going to a 1-1 tie after both regulation and overtime. Gutches, who made the team by winning 2 of 3 matches against Kevin Jackson in the trials, went 5-0 in the tournament. Frank Shamrock will now face Dan Henderson, who placed 7th in the last Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling and is 2-0 in Vale Tudo competition on the IWF October 11 pay-per-view show. In regard to the bar fight last week, Tank Abbott claimed he was 25 yards away from the parking lot fight when it happened and that he had 10 witnesses who would say that he actually broke the fight up and said the police had not even contacted him about any charges in the incident. Abbott had signed a letter of intent to fight on the October 11 Tokyo Dome show underneath the Hickson Gracie vs. Nobuhiko Tada main event. Because that show is 6 days before the next UFC, there is some talk that UFC will attempt to pay Abbott not to fight on that show so he'd be fresher for the UFC tournament. There is talk of rematching probably the most exciting fight in UFC history, Abbott vs. Oleg Toktarov in the first round of the tournament on October 17. Royce Alger got his first NHB win on August 30 in Davenport, Iowa on an outdoor extreme challenge show in the rain, beating an overmatched indie pro wrestler, Joe DeForia from Florida, with a shoulder lock submission in about 90 seconds. Most of the matches on that show went the time limit because the ring was described as being like a swimming pool and nobody could get submissions on because of the slipperiness and lack of footing. The July 28 Dallas Morning News had a story about Guy Mesger. The sportswriter opened the story saying he had gotten a phone call about a local athlete who was a world champion, and when he asked the sport and the guy said UFC, the sportswriter responded with, "I've seen it. It's not sport. It's barbarism. And, thank you very much, it's beneath me." But he said after the Tyson fight, he changed his tune and decided to interview Mesger. Mesger came off pretty good in the story. Jerry Bolander is scheduled to fight Murillo Bustamante on September 20 in Brazil. David Isaacs of Semaphore Entertainment Group is headed to Japan this week to negotiate regarding putting the December/January pay-per-view there. ECW. There were no shows over the past week, so the major news was Perry Saturn signing with WCW. All kinds of stories have come from this, including that WCW was making a major raid of ECW talent and blaming all kinds of different parties for that. From all accounts, numerous wrestlers were contacted by WCW and saw free enterprise and stuff, but the money WCW offered the guys is way over what one would logically believe their market value to be, considering what guys with similar or a lot more talent that are already over in WCW are earning. You can read whatever you want to into that statement, although Saturn actually doesn't fall into that category since the figure bandied about that he was offered was $100,000 per year. John Cronus won't be following, as Saturn apparently has been wanting to break up the team and go as a single for more than 1 year, and they even began the breakup angle last year, but Paul Heyman convinced the two to stay together since he'd market them as the best tag team in the world. Expect some major internal changes in ECW very soon. Steve Carl of ECW claims that the Hardcore Heaven show will end up doing in excess of 40,000 buys, and that the first show also did a little over 40,000 buys, so that there really won't be much difference in number of buys between the two shows. The house show itself in Fort Lauderdale would be inaccurate to have been reported here as papered. While we don't have exact figures, there were about 1,650 paid and about a $60,000 gate. The free tickets were about 200 media comps and 101 tickets from those who purchased Bob Ryder's travel package from Philadelphia, in which ringside tickets were thrown in. The show wasn't technically a sellout as reported here either, as they were about 70 tickets shy. They expect the November 30th pay-per-view to be moved to a 7 p.m. Eastern start, which should benefit the replay number since it won't start at midnight Eastern time. Lance Wright is turning into a heel announcer, acting like since he's been in the WWF that he's too good for ECW. After the pay-per-view show, Wright was first given notice but then asked to try the heel gimmick at the Queen's TV, and Heyman is now going to keep him in the new role. Expect Aldo Montoya and Bobby Duncombe Jr. to get a bigger push. Nothing is definite in regard to being part of the September 22nd Raw from Madison Square Garden, other than in some form it is expected to take happen. WCW. This week's major controversy revolves around the skit that Kevin Nash, as Arn Anderson, Six as Ric Flair, Marcus Bagwell, as Kurt Hennig, and Conan, as Steve McMichael did on Nitro, doing their imitation of the now famous Arn Anderson interview from 1 week earlier. As the story goes, the deal was played out ahead of time where they would dedicate the show to Anderson, and then the NWO would make so much fun of him with the combination of the two things theoretically building up tremendous heat. Which is what happened. We got more reaction, some very positive thinking it was hilarious and some very negative thinking it was in terrible taste, largely depending upon what part of the country people were from and who they grew up watching. Originally, the finish of the skit was going to have the Horsemen run out and totally clean house on the NWO, with Anderson watching from the stage area with his arms folded and a big smile on his face. Before the show started, Terry Taylor was told by Eric Bischoff to nix the Horsemen comeback and not let them do the run-in, which it is believed came at the suggestion of Nash. Later in the show, Flair was supposed to instead do an interview, but by this time Flair was so mad he refused to go on because he felt that by not coming out during the skit it made the Horsemen look so bad that there was nothing he could do to salvage the situation. Anderson wasn't as mad immediately after the skit, but was said to be furious later that night, including winding up in a confrontation with Booker Kevin Sullivan after calling home and finding out how mad and upset his wife and 12-year-old son were. Flair wasn't so mad about the portrayal of him, but of the portrayal of his best friend who he's protective of and the mockery of the very serious retirement interview he did the week before. There were even reports Anderson wound up so mad he was thinking of quitting the company. Flair's contract expires in February and he hasn't signed an extension, although WWF, due to the lawsuit against WCW, is very leery about doing anything that looked like they were interested in WCW talent right now, even though you know they'd like to have Flair if only as primarily a goodwill ambassador more than a full-time wrestler. There are also reports that some or all of this behind-the-scenes controversy was simply a Kevin Sullivan/Brian Pillman angle, although my impression is that isn't the case. Of course, this only makes sense if the War Games were to turn out to be Horsemen versus NWO, which isn't going to be the case. The skit itself was absolutely hilarious in spots, particularly Waltman with the fake oversized nose, the clothes, the tears and the dancing, and Nash was incredible, but it went on way too long and realistically was so inside and biting. Since Anderson's mother died very young due to alcoholism, that one could see if the former scenario is the real one, that it was designed that way by Nash to stick it to Anderson. The heat between the Horsemen and NWO is legit to a point that's silly because at the Clash on August 21st, there was a bomb threat called in Nashville on the Flair match, and Nash was joking after the show that Anderson must have called it in because they wanted management to think somebody actually cared about Flair. And there is a major level of discomfort of late in the dressing room regarding people trying to take all the credit for the recent success. The funny part is the TV ratings are still slightly lower for the year as compared to the same period the previous year before there was a such thing as the NWO. Buy rates aren't all that different, and that's with hotshotting guys like Kevin Green, Reggie White and Dennis Rodman all over the place. House business is way up, but the most valuable person when it comes to that is Zane Bresloff, and the fact that the television show Nitro, and not any of the individuals, has become super hot as the rank and file house shows aren't put together with strong lineups to draw big houses to begin with, and tickets are being sold mainly for the name brand as opposed to any singular individual. Not that the wrestlers and angles aren't overall hotter this year when it comes to drawing, because they are, but WCW is at a point right now where any individual, whether it be Savage, Hogan, Flair, Sting, Hall or Nash, could leave tomorrow and it would make no serious difference in ratings, buy rates or arena grosses. Lineup now for the Fall Brawl pay-per-view on September 14th is War Games with Luger and Flair and Page and X, either Giant or Hennig, versus Team NWO, Hall and Nash and Savage and Six, Malenko versus Jarrett. Jericho defends the Cruiserweight title against Eddie Guerrero, Wright defends the TV title against Dragon. Wrath and Mortis versus Mang and Barbarian, Steiners versus Harlem Heat and Conan versus McMichael. Either Malenko Jarrett or Conan MC Michael will wind up being a U.S. title match. Nitro on September 1st from Pensacola, Florida drew 6,483, 5,648 paying $112,975. It was a show that lasted just over 3 hours. They had far too many taped features, so the show dragged in a lot of spots. 3 hours came off as too long, although the definitive word is whether or not the audience stuck with it, and we don't have the ratings and quarters at press time. They opened with a well-done Anderson tribute and replayed the interview. McMichael and Benoit beat Jarrett and Eddie Guerrero when Malenko splashed Jarrett off the top rope and McMichael scored the pin in 10:09 of a very good match. Hall, Savage and Elizabeth came out for a confrontation with Zbyszko. Zbyszko said that they must be friends with Hogan because they've got something on their nose. Well, if he can get away with the truth, good for him. Mortis beat Silver King in 3:31 with a flatliner. Samoan drop off the middle ropes. Another good match as Silver King looked great and Mortis looked good as well. James Vandenberg challenged Mang and Barbarian to come out, which they did, and they cleaned house on Mortis and Wrath. Yuji Nagata pinned Malenko in 450 when Jarrett interfered in another good match. During the match, Mike Tenay brought up Nagata's legit amateur background: 1989 Japanese Collegiate National Champion, 1992 Greco-Roman National Champion. Zbyszko made fun of it and acted like he was a cross between Ken Shamrock and Dean Malenko as a shooter, saying how he'd let a wrestler take him down and then break his arm. Like some guy who survived the New Japan dojo doesn't know how to shoot. I still can't figure out these bitter has-been wrestlers who think their jobs as announcers is to not get the new wrestlers or the product over, particularly when they were putting Nagata over one of the company's top stars, even via fluke. Anyway, here's a reality check when it comes to Larry Whistler. When I was in college at San Jose State, the athletic director was a good friend of mine named David Adams, who was a great college wrestler in the 50s and later coached wrestling at Pitt for many years. When he was wrestling coach at Pitt, Larry Whistler was a high school wrestler in Pittsburgh. I figured from being a pro wrestling fan and how he was billed when he turned pro in Pittsburgh that he had to choose between going to college on a wrestling scholarship or turning pro under the tutelage of Bruno, that he must have been a hotshot high school wrestler. The truth of the matter, according to Adams, who knew him well, is that he was a slightly above average high school wrestler. Adams would always point out he wasn't a good high school wrestler, and was nowhere near the caliber of even being someone that he would have considered as having college potential. Ultimo Dragon beat La Parka by dropkicking a chair into Parka's face in 437. Another good match. After the match, Dragon put Sonny Ono in the Dragon Sleeper. Marcus Bagwell beat Glacier in 624 with the Buff Blockbuster. Great finishing move. Match was okay. Bagwell has the presence. Guess they've given up on Glacier. They aired a Roddy Piper video, so he's on his way back in the next 2 weeks. Lismark Jr. pinned Villano 4. Well, actually, he pinned Villano 5, who did the switch in 410. The first time they did the switch, none of the three announcers even noticed it. The second time, Tenay noticed it and had to call attention as Shuvani and Zbyszko were asleep. Lismark Jr. was pretty disappointing, although the crowd was chanting boring from the start. Lex Luger did an interview asking Dallas Page to come out, so of course he didn't. Disco Inferno returned dancing as one of the Nitro girls and got into a shoving match with Alex Wright. So to make perfect sense, Disco then interfered, helping Wright retain his TV title over Hugh Morris in 552 in a match that was bad. Morris is really agile for a guy his size, and it makes people think he's a good worker, but somehow his matches are usually not any good. Stevie Richards beat Damien in 48 when Raven DDTs Damien before the match started. Richards tried to deliver CPR and mouth-to-mouth and was doing the early ECW Clueless Putz gimmick. Big Bubba came out for an interview and said his name was Ray Traylor and said when he was off he didn't get a card or letter from anyone in the NWO. Traylor then pinned Prince Iaukea in 315 with the Bubba Slam. He's going to be one of the 90 other wrestlers in WCW headed to oblivion. Then came the NWO Anderson interview spoof. Chris Jericho was supposed to wrestle Chavo Guerrero Jr., but it wound up with every wrestler backstage that they couldn't figure out how to use on the show running and doing a mishmash of suicidal dives for no reason. Among those running around was the debut of Super Astro, who couldn't have made a less auspicious debut had he had to job in 15 seconds. Bischoff and Hogan came out for an interview. Hogan challenged Sting to come out and he'd give him a title match right there, but Sting was nowhere to be found. J.J. Dillon came out and Hogan gave him one of the lamest punches of the 20th century and a few very easy leg drops and spray-painted "Bite Me" on his white. Finally, Savage and Hall beat Luger and Page in 1029 when Hall pinned Page after Luger accidentally clotheslined him. Real bad. Page would never tag out, so at least they told a story, but the offense by Hall and Nash wasn't much. Then Luger came in and missed on just about every blow he threw before the finish. No weekend ratings available at press time either due to Labor Day weekend holding everything up one day. The first episode of the new Thursday show will be on January 7th from Daytona Beach. While nothing is certain, it appears that one of the two shows, likely Nitro, will be the NWO show. The Thursday show will probably be the WCW show and focus on history and tradition with features showing things through the years like they did with the open of Nitro on Anderson. Juventud Guerrera suffered an elbow injury on August 22nd in Knoxville doing the 450 splash on Psychosis, but will probably be back in action on either September 8th or September 15th. Hector Garza suffered torn ligaments in his arm when he was installing air conditioning at his home, and the unit slipped and fell on him while he was on a ladder and cut up his arm badly. He's expected out of action for about 1 month. He doesn't get a scratch doing those corkscrew planches every Monday. On the August 23rd Saturday Night Show during a Lucha six-man tag, Dusty Rhodes set a new announcing record by going an entire match on commentary without mentioning the name of even one of the 6 competitors. Chuck Tash, the trainer of WCW, finished up on August 26th in Augusta, Georgia to take a similar job this season with the NBA's Sacramento Kings. There's a decent chance that Ice Train will be returning. Satellite Direct magazine in the September issue has a photo of Savage with the cutline stating to check out Randy Savage every Monday night on the USA Network's Monday Night Raw. Las Vegas did about 2,800 tickets and $130,000 the first day tickets went on sale for Halloween Havoc. Among the wrestlers from Mexico expected in this month include the first round of EMLL wrestlers, which will be Apollo Dantes, Dr. Wagner Jr. and Shocker probably on September 8th or September 15th. AZTECA wrestles El Texano, Kendo, Ninja de Fuego, Salsero, Mr. Aguila, Black Warrior and Jerry Estrada are also likely this month. Rey Mysterio Jr. met with Dr. James Andrews, who examined his knee and said it wasn't that bad. He's being fitted with a brace and should be back in action probably on September 8th. WCW Saturday Night for August 30th and September 6th was taped on August 26th in Augusta, Georgia before 4,000 paying $49,760. In the key matches that aired on August 30th, Dragon beat Psychosis in a very good match. Silver King, Ono and Psychosis beat on Dragon afterwards. Glacier and Ernest Miller beat Meng and Barbarian via DQ when Wrath and Mortis interfered and they did a 3-way. McMichael, who was over like crazy, beat Jarrett via DQ when Wright and Eddie Guerrero interfered and Benoit and Hennig made the save. Yuji Nagata pinned Silver King in a great match but crowd really wasn't interested. Richards got back together with Raven. Benoit beat Bobby Eaton with Joey Maggs again watching Eaton. High Voltage beat Johnny Grunge in a handicap match via DQ when Rocco Rock interfered and threw ref Mark Curtis over the top rope, and Steiners beat Bagwell and Norton via DQ when Heat ran in and attacked both teams. For September 6th, right over Chavo Guerrero Jr. in what was said to have been a great match, Glacier and Miller beat Wrath and Mortis thanks to help from Meng and Barbarian, Jericho beat Hector Guerrero, Norton beat Hugh Morris, Public Enemy beat High Voltage in a match filled with weapons, and Hennig beat Condon via DQ when Vincent interfered. Weekend house shows were August 30th in Columbus, Georgia drawing $4,315 and $73,518 and August 31st in Mobile, Alabama drawing $3,351 and $67,410. Mobile was reported to us as the hottest house show from any promotion in Alabama in years, with Flair and Page particularly getting the big reactions. They even went nuts for Scotty Riggs. WWF. The August 29th USA Network Friday Night Main Event special started about 45 minutes late because Pete Sampras' tennis match went long and ended up drawing a 1.6 rating and 5.3 share, which is about what was figured going in. Besides the Taka Michinoku vs. Jerry Lynn match, which everyone raved about, the only other highlight was the announcing by Jim Ross and Jim Cornette, who spent 2 hours and never ignored anyone's finishing moves, blew off anyone's credentials or ability, ignored the match in the ring, or all the things we expect from wrestling announcers today. All the run-in DQs weren't as bad since we see half the show one week and the other half next week, but it must have been murder on the fans there live, and the reports from the building we got were all negative on the show. Bret Hart suffered a mild concussion in his match with Vader, although he didn't miss any shots. They did an angle backstage with the DOA and Sergeant Slaughter, and one of the bikes got away and ran Slaughter over and he suffered some burns, but he's also okay. Weekend house shows saw August 28th in Tacoma, Washington drew $5,341 and $92,020. August 29th in Victoria, BC drew $5,341 and $84,100. August 30th in Regina, Sask drew $3,328 and $70,576. August 31st in Saskatoon, Sask drew $4,203 and $91,534, and September 1st in Thunder Bay, ONT drew $3,180 and $62,472. Merchandise for the week was $151,890, or $7.10 per head. Expect a tournament for the IC title to be announced on the September 8th Raw show. Steve Austin is going to be booked on road shows in October, but not as a wrestler. He may wrestle on television by late October or early November, and his first major match back will be at Survivor Series in Montreal. Mark Marrow and Ahmed Johnson are back on the booking sheets as of September 19th. Mark Henry is headed to Calgary to train under Bret Hart and Leo Burke. WWF is trying one last prayer to see if they'll ever get anything out of their multi-million guaranteed contract they gave Henry before the Olympics. Matt Ghaffari, who won the silver medal at super heavyweight for the U.S. in the 1996 Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling, is getting a tryout in Connecticut this week to see what kind of money offer WWF will make. Ghaffari negotiated with both WWF and WCW after the Olympics, but his asking price was so high neither side bid. The October 5th pay-per-view show in St. Louis and October 6th and October 7th Raw tapings in Oklahoma City and Tulsa are likely to be some kind of a Legends-themed shows. The Oklahoma City and Tulsa shows are confirmed as having Danny Hodge, Bill Watson, Jack and Jerry Briscoe be honored. St. Louis is being worked on, but they are trying to do an NWA World Champions theme with Dory and Terry Funk, Jack Briscoe, Harley Race, Gene Kiniski, Luthez, and Sam Mushnick, although that is more in the talking stages than a done deal. Kind of a weird irony that WWF, which spent the 80s destroying and ignoring prior wrestling history in these markets, is a decade later trying to reinvent it. Sonny is now doing the old Missy Hyatt dressed-up woman in the boys' locker room gimmick. It's entertaining to see how many different euphemisms for the word tramp we can hear in a given 2-hour show. There is talk of adding an unannounced minis match on the September 7th pay-per-view show. The minis from Mexico will be at the September 8th and September 9th Raw tapings, as will Michinoku. Lynn wasn't offered a contract because they have so many people under contract and don't have enough full-time work for those already under contract, but will likely get a lot of TV bookings based on his performance in Chicago. Jacques Rougeau has looked for work and may get some bookings in Canada part-time or be involved in some way in helping promote the Survivor Series in Montreal. There are no plans right now regarding Great Sasuke returning. Sasuke wanted to trade even up an appearance on a major WWF show in exchange for Undertaker appearing on his October 10th show, but WWF wasn't going for it, believing that Undertaker in Japan is worth far more than Sasuke in the US. Paul Heyman asked Vince McMahon if he could use Sasuke and his talent on his November 30th pay-per-view, and McMahon gave him the impression they didn't want anything to do with him and to be his guest. Scott Putski has signed a contract. Regarding all the rumors of Jim Cornette as a manager, Cornette has so much office work, which includes writing the television shows and announcing on Shotgun and perhaps on Raw for the new season, that he doesn't have time to go on the road, so he can't get involved in any kind of a major program, so that's been holding up his going back to managing. Bret vs. Michaels vs. Undertaker in a triangle is the dark match main event for the September 22nd Raw in Madison Square Garden. The idea of having Michaels, Rude and Helmsley as the new clique is already out the window, although they may put Michaels in with Helmsley as they are still trying to find a way to elevate Helmsley to the next level. Ken Shamrock did his first pinfall job since coming to the WWF at the Canadian house shows for Owen Hart, with Bulldog interfering. As expected, Owen, Bulldog and Bret worked heel style and were cheered wildly every night. Reports were that Shamrock and Owen stole the show on the Canadian shows. In Tacoma, Shamrock was put over. The tour was scheduled with Bret vs. Austin on top, but with Austin out and Undertaker given the week off, they used Patriot on top. In the US, Patriot won via DQ. In Canada, Patriot did a heel interview where he gives the Canadian crowd the finger early in the show, and it wound up with Patriot cheating to win after a ref bump when a second ref counted the pin, but the first referee started and counted as Bret scored the win. WWF One Night Only has been changed to a 3-hour block and cost about $16. This is only the 6th pay-per-view event ever in England, the other 5 being major boxing matches. The readers' pages. Sign everywhere, a sign. I attended the August 4th Nitro and my sign was confiscated. I was sitting next to the guy with the China is the man sign on the hard camera side when WCW security walked over to him and said they had to take his sign away. I'm somewhat divided on the confiscation of signs issue. On one hand, fans pay their money, so they should have the right to bring their sign. On the other hand, every time I turn on Raw, I see 1,000 signs in the crowd being waved and thrust in front of the cameras every 3 seconds, and it's quite a distraction. The guy's sign was taken away because it made reference to a WWF character. And while I think it was childish of them to take away his sign, I do understand where they are coming from. The confiscation of my sign was another story. As a longtime lucha fanatic, I had spent the better part of the afternoon making a 100% Rudos sign to hold up during the matches with the Mexicans. If you go back to watch the tape, you'll notice that the only time I held the sign up was during matches that involved wrestlers from the promo AZTECA organization. I didn't needlessly flash it every 3 minutes. I was selective in the times I held it up, conscious of the fact I didn't want to continually obstruct the view of others sitting behind me. As Nitro entered its 3rd hour, WCW security approached me and said they had to take away my sign. Their reasoning? They don't want to have people hold up signs who are sitting in the front row. Never mind that 3 guys at the end of the row were holding up NWO signs. What kind of nonsense is this? Were they afraid I was getting the Mexicans over better than Larry Zbyszko and Bobby Heenan? Conan seemed to appreciate my sign as he gave me a quick thumbs up before his match. My sign had no profanity or suggestive language and it didn't make any kind of reference to the WWF. So what's the problem? I'm surprised they didn't give me one of those white Nitro t-shirts to put over my black promo AZTECA t-shirt. John Molinaro. Burlington, Ontario. I'd like to address an annoying trend. Recently WWF and WCW decided to relax their rules regarding signs brought to the arena at television tapings. It was meant as a way for fans to show support for their favorite wrestlers. Yet like many other things in this business, it is being abused at an alarming rate. I'm therefore pleading with fans to leave the following kinds of signs at home since they are annoying and distracting to fans trying to watch wrestling. Don't make signs which substitute your name for that of your favorite wrestler. You come off as pathetic. Just because Austin 316 refers to an S-kisser doesn't mean Murray 316 or Phil 316 means the same thing. Don't say hi to your girlfriend, wife, grandmother, pet or anyone else that nobody watching gives a damn about. Say hello to them on the telephone. It's stupid and pointless. Don't use Raw and Nitro as an opportunity for free advertising. Be clever but don't be crude. "We've heard enough" was a classic sign. It was a pun, it got the fans' frustrations across and subtly was a message that pointed at the person who deserved the blame the most. It sent a clear message. The right people knew exactly what it meant. The opposite is a sign like last week's on Raw which read, "Hulk and Flair have tits." Not only is this kind of crude, but it's classless and it showed that the person who wrote it was a clueless putz. Hogan deserves the knocks, but to knock Flair in such a stupid manner shows no brains at all. When the individual who made that sign turns 48, he'll wish he was in the shape Flair is in. How many 48-year-olds around are half the athlete that Flair is? For all that man has done for the sport and since he still outworks many stars who are 20 years his junior, he deserves a lot of respect. The guy writing the sign is probably drooling in the corner somewhere telling the people sitting around him how great Sid is, that Brackus is going to be a big star and that Sable is a natural beauty. Russ Kress. Union, New Jersey. WCW. Why is Michael Buffer allowed to ramble on during ring introductions to the point that everyone watching realizes he's totally clueless when it comes to wrestling? Why would J.J. Dillon give Sting a deadline, and then no-show the event himself? Why should we care who won between Raven and Stevie Richards? Why would Raven risk getting hurt by doing a no-DQ match for a company that he supposedly doesn't work for? Why should we believe Tony Schiavone when he tries to put over Raven and the great athletes in the NWO when he can't even tell the difference between the real Sting and all the bogus ones? Why does Eric Bischoff constantly need mic time to get himself over when Dr. Schiller told him that he didn't even want to hear a rumor that he was in a men's room at a WCW event? The Clash sucked so bad they shouldn't have even bothered showing up. They did a great job using the show to promote the next pay-per-view show. 3 weeks to go till the pay-per-view and not one match was announced. Within the past month, every title in WCW has changed hands except one. Eric's boys shouldn't confuse their talent, and lack thereof, with the size of their paychecks. Francis DeLauretis. Shoemakersville, Pennsylvania. ECW. I totally blew off the ECW pay-per-view. This was the first pay-per-view show in a couple of years that I didn't watch. I was a big ECW fan and was really excited when they made their first appearances in Pittsburgh, but honest to God, their live shows were awful. The crowds were over and popped for the most basic of stuff, but out of 3 live shows, there were maybe 2 good matches. The loss of Raven, and somewhat Stevie Richards, has really hurt this company. While I think Paul Heyman is smart in pushing the guys he knows aren't going anywhere, none of them are all that appealing and there aren't enough good performers to hold my interest. And how about booking Jake Roberts as a surprise? Was Junkyard Dog not available? I wish WCW would come to town more often. I drove down to Johnstown, Pennsylvania last month for a house show in a dilapidated building that was half full on a Sunday night, and it was still 1,000 times better than the WWF Raw taping in Pittsburgh the next night. WCW has a great mix of talent with all different styles of wrestlers getting over. Andrew Stowell. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'd give the ECW show a definite thumbs up. I enjoyed Snow vs. Van Dam the most. I watch ECW most weeks on satellite and realize it's the company style, but I thought the main event had way too many gimmicks brought into the ring. This isn't to take anything away from the 3 wrestlers. They worked incredibly hard and took some horrifying bumps. Some of the spots were awesome, But the match, as great as it was, around 4 stars, could have told more of a story. I realize it's harder to have brawling style matches build and tell a story than for a wrestling match to do the same, but Paul E definitely did a solid job with regards to the show. I'm not sure if the WWF benefits enough from the ECW relationship to make it worth their while. I can't see Paul letting any of the top ECW wrestlers put over the WWF boys. WWF certainly can't have any ECW guys go over on Brett or Sean. Trent Walters. St. Albert, Alberta. The second ECW pay-per-view show turned into a total embarrassment. It was humiliating to watch Terry Funk performing with a company of amateurs. At least when Willie Mays played out his career with the Mets in 1973, he was still playing in the major leagues. There is nothing new, state-of-the-art or cutting-edge about ECW. It's just brawling and trying to appeal to the lowest instincts of its fans in order to cover up a total lack of talent. State-of-the-art is working matches that resemble skilled athletic events. Wrestling companies on their last legs are the ones who revert to using cheap, washed-up, and unskilled wrestlers who are useless without brawling and blading. ECW fans rage about Doink and the WWF, but when I see ECW all I see is a bunch of clowns running around jumping off balconies, breaking gimmick tables for no reason, and hitting each other with chairs and garbage cans without selling. Trying hard and abusing yourself doesn't make one a good worker. The wrestlers should show their dedication by using their ring time to condition themselves to do things like bridging maneuvers and suplexes, and thus mimic true wrestlers. I'm looking for a pay-per-view that conforms with nature's laws of physics, physiology and psychology. Some ethics wouldn't hurt either. I'd like to watch a pay-per-view without having morons, bikers, porno stars and perverts shoved down my throat. But then again, Paul can't control who is in his audience. After seeing Lex Luger at the Osaka Dome and against Hulk Hogan, I've got to believe he's leading the race for Worst Wrestler of the Year. It's bad when you have to be carried by Hogan. I'm glad you didn't label Hashimoto as the greatest draw in wrestling. I don't believe any individuals are all that responsible for drawing these days. Promotions are what draws in the 90s. Nitro sells out without even announcing who is on the card because people know it's live television and think that something will happen. New Japan is the most successful promotion in the world because it's perceived as the #1 promotion by the wrestling fans in Japan. I like Hashimoto, and used to like Muto, and the New Japan Junior Heavyweights supply some of the best wrestling in the world, but does anyone care about Sasaki, Tenzan Ogawa, Kojima, Nakanishi, Hirata, Yasuda, Goto or even Chono? I don't. I know about his success, but Riki Choshu's booking has always been overrated. I don't like the system where anyone can beat anyone. He's used Muto and himself poorly. Knowing how he always goes back to New Japan versus outsiders, he's going to need help from All Japan before long. Steve Yohei. Montebello, California. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 95009-1228. September 8, 1997. This is the end of this program. Thanks for listening. See you next time.